You are listening to Talking Star Wars.
Hello, Star Wars fans.
I'm Alex.
I'm Connor.
And today we are talking about Star Wars.
And we're taking a look at a sort of a broad topic, something that doesn't exactly have a specific cause, but we're asking ourselves, what led to the downfall of the Jedi? Why is there no Jedi Order, new Jedi Order, anything post Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith?
Yeah, so we are looking specifically at what are the factors that led to the downfall and destruction of the Jedi Order during the prequel trilogy. And then by trying to continue their policies and beliefs, why Luke's new Jedi Order then met almost the exact same fate. So what are but mostly focusing on the former, what factors led the Jedi to be not easily, but so very thoroughly destroyed by Palpatine, and as we even see at the time, uniquely vulnerable to members of their order falling to the dark side, turning on the order, leaving the order. You know, we see that throughout the history of the recorded history of the Jedi, only 20 Jedi Knights had chosen to leave the order voluntarily. But as you can see, if you listen to episode 54, during the period of the Clone Wars, we get at least 5 fallen Jedi that fall to the dark side in the space of just a few years, as well as additional Jedi that just leave the order. So what
subsequent Jedi after that, each being highly tempted by the dark side because they're not trained traditionally, they still have much attachment and emotionality ruling their judgment. So they're all tempted by darkness like none other.
And unlike Jedi, for example, in the High Republic period, like Elzar Mann, who are tempted by darkness and are able to fall back on a support network that then guides them away and puts them back on the right path, that doesn't exist for any of the Jedi, both in the prequel era and beyond. So we're going to look at the factors that led to why we think the Jedi Order was so brittle, and go from there. So, Connor, what are your thoughts? So we talked about the High Republic in our last episode.
To sort of sum that up, the Jedi of the High Republic were almost untested. They were idealists.
Yes.
They had come out of this period of the Old Republic, which is characterized by, seems like, endless war between Jedi and Sith.
So Jedi and Mandalorians.
Right.
And Mandalorians and Mandalorians.
And Mandalorian and Sith. But at this point, we have Jedi alone. We have Jedi who are the primary Force users of the galaxy, and it seems like the rules and regulations are a little bit more lax, where there is lower expectations for Padawans, where they are almost expected to trifle with attachment with one another before completing their trials and becoming full-fledged Jedi who are only devoted to the Force. And even if they fall along the way, they're expected to go meditate, find their way, even leave the Order, learn about themselves, always welcome to come back.
The Order has some fluidity and some adaptability that we do not see by the time we see Mace Windu and sitting on the Jedi Council.
So it's almost a matter of becoming weaponized against the Nihil, this marauding force of the galaxy that threatens the whole Republic. The Republic leans on the Jedi to be peacekeepers and soldiers, so it's almost as if they have to become more dogmatic in order to ensure that they can remain peacekeepers in more tumultuous times.
I would say dogmatic is a great word, and I think we see the dogma of the Jedi growing more and more strict as time goes on. We see in the High Republic, it's just that process just starting, where, for example, Jedi Master Stellan Gios, who becomes one of the newest members of the Jedi Council, is fairly rigid in his views. He sees his Padawan as incredibly powerful in the Force, for Nestra Rowe, and he sends her to take the trials even though she doesn't think she's ready. And he disapproves of his colleague Elzar Mann's experimentations with the Force. Has a very rigid view, and it seems like conflict in this organized way against the Nihil and then later against the Separatists sort of leave the Jedi vulnerable. So I think it's not just, so I think as we can acknowledge this is one of the main points, is the
little background.
Yeah, by growing more, the Jedi grew more dogmatic as time went on, as a result of multiple factors, one of which was reacting to external threats. So to be an effective fighting force, they had to adopt some standards. Jedi were exposed to the carnage and death of battle, which is always dangerous for a force-sensitive person. But that doesn't entirely explain. So we see in the High Republic period, Jedi having the ability to take retreats, to take escapes, to have a support network that acknowledges their very, I would say human, but let's say their very mortal struggles. Mm-hmm. That appears to have largely vanished by the time of the Phantom Menace, where, I mean, maybe slightly, even before the Clone Wars started, we don't hear about any Wayseekers. Mace Windu is very rigid in his views. Qui-Gon Jinn considered leaving the Order himself, but Dooku had already left. But I will say, in Tales of the Jedi, we see Dooku, even after he left the Order, was still invited back. Mm-hmm. They were still trying to win Dooku back to the Order. So, are we looking at the Clone Wars as this really linchpin area that sort of, there were all these stress points where other factors had to go, but then it sort of coalesced them, and Palpatine was able to take advantage and really take all of these troubling indications of the Jedi, dial them up to 11, and use it to destroy them?
I think so, because it really galvanized the Jedi towards battle, towards war. They were seemingly more invested and more intertwined with the acts of war, where, yes, they're fighting against droids, but they're still making it great influence on different parts of the galaxy through their influence.
We see so many Jedi fall during the Clone Wars, more so than we've seen before. We know the Jedi self-acknowledged that their vision was clouded by the dark side, which we know is Palpatine's influence ourselves. He was deliberately clouding and poisoning the view of the Jedi Council for years. But due to his proximity and knowledge, they had no idea a Sith Master more powerful than many who had come in centuries, was among them, clouding their vision and preventing them from seeing it. And I think in reaction to that, they grew even more dogmatic, clinging more and more to their traditions.
I think I'll say, then this is a hot take, but the Jedi fell due to the absence of the Sith in the galaxy. I think that it's this...
So rather, I would say to reword that, due to their complacency.
Mm-hmm. And they're complacent without the Sith. When they have the Sith, they see directly that this is the dark side. This is an absolutist view towards the Force. Without that, the Jedi themselves start to gain those ideas of absolutes. Even the Sith, only a Sith believes in absolutes, is an absolute. It's a contradiction. I think that the Jedi start to have this constraining hold on the Force, which Luke brings up in The Last Jedi, where they claim it for themselves, and they don't realize that the Force belongs to all. They are the keepers of the peace, but they're not the keepers of the Force.
I would agree that I believe they saw themselves as the sole source of truth. I don't think the absence of the Sith was what brought it about, because the Sith were absent for 1,000 years, and for 1,000 years the Jedi were perfectly fine. Barely any Jedi left. Barely any Jedi fell to the dark side that we know about. They were fairly stable and a positive source of light and life in the galaxy for 100 generations. So I don't think it's the absence of the Sith. In fact, it was the presence of the Sith that I think took advantage of the fault lines. I think it was their increasing dogma that made them uniquely vulnerable at this point in time to destruction. But, I mean, when the Sith were around, it's not like the Jedi Order was healthier. We had the mass defection of Jedi during the Jedi-Sith Wars to the Sith. I mean, it's not quite canon, but I'm going to treat it as canon because nothing's contradicted it. Knights of the Old Republic, I mean, Darth Revan and Darth Malak had an entire legion of former Jedi that became their Sith. They trained new apprentices, of course, from Force sensitives across the galaxy, but the core of their army were former Jedi trained by the Council.
I think there's this give and take, this ebb and flow between the light and dark side. And they still existed. They were still in operation during this Jedi-Sith war. So yes, you have Jedi who fall, but you also have Sith who become redeemed, going out through the Knights of the Old Republic game. It's only when the Sith are absolutely destroyed that millennia later, the Jedi are wiped out. It's this sort of reflection, this what do they call that in the Phantom Menace? It's a symbiotic circle.
Mm-hmm.
What happens to one of you happens to both of you. It's this idea that the Jedi and the Sith, the light and the dark, are part of a whole. And if only the dang Sith would just stop trying to corrupt the galaxy and gain power. But it, in some way, in my mind, allows the Jedi to remain stalwart symbols of hope and not become stagnant. So if there's a way for the Jedi to develop, to progress, then they could avoid that stagnancy. But they didn't have their ideological opposition to remind them of what not to be.
I'm going to disagree with you there, Connor.
Sure.
I see your point.
And I think it's a fair disagreement just because this is just sort of a broad look at how an organization falls. But we look at this initial fall. So we have the Clone Wars where the Jedi are galvanized towards war. We have dozens who are falling to battle. We have other Jedi and Padawans who are starting to turn away from the Order because this is occurring. And we have the ultimate downfall where Palpatine is able to overcome the Jedi, point at them as being the cause of the problems in the galaxy, and wipe them out, all of them.
I think we need to focus on the lack of flexibility that the Order shows by the time of the Phantom Menace. So we see lots of Jedi fall to the dark side. Barriss Offee, Pong Krell. Let's use Anakin Skywalker. Let's use them as examples of. There's 3 different reasons for falling, all of which I think reveal 3 different fault lines present on Jedi Order. For Anakin Skywalker, it's attachment. So Anakin Skywalker falls in love with a woman, Padme Amidala. He falls in love. And secretly marries.
Has children. It's all the things that a Jedi is not allowed to do.
But he did not feel able to confess this or be open about this to the Jedi Council. Like, could they have solved this? Could he have made maybe that involves leaving the Order, but he did not feel like he was in a position where he was able to confess what was going on. I think part of this was due to the Clone Wars, and we talked about, like, if the Clone Wars ends, does he end up leaving the Order? Probably. But
the ego, it's his, he idolized the Jedi as a child, and he's so close to being a Jedi master.
Yeah, because of the war, he didn't bring it up. Obi-Wan knew something was happening, but stayed silent out of respect for his friend, and assuming that, he was a Jedi Knight, expected that he would handle this himself. But Anakin just hid it from the Jedi Order until it was the lever by which Palpatine caused him to fall to the dark side.
It's all or nothing. It's choose your attachment, choose the Order. There's no middle ground. It's very much an absolute in that way.
Yeah, there's no we will help you through this, we'll figure it out. There's just, this is a time of war, we have no ability to have flexibility. You're with us or against us. Yeah. It's the Jedi being forced into this absolute thinking that we don't see in the High Republic period, and then I think we do see by the time of the Clone Wars. But due to both the influence of the war, the Jedi's increasing dogma, and Palpatine's influence by clouding their vision and manipulating them towards further, more and more compromising positions as the orchestrator of the Clone Wars.
And then with Barriss and Pong, Barriss is more just disgusted by war and the Jedi's role in it, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, so she never even wanted to be in a war. And the fact that the Jedi are so openly engaging in it destroys her faith in the Order, until she decides that the only way to do is to engage in a terrorist attack against the Jedi themselves to sort of prove how terrible the war is in an act of violent desperation. So, and again, she didn't feel like she could bring this up to her master. We'd see her questioning the war several times before this, but either her feelings weren't taken seriously, she felt trapped in the Order, her voice wasn't heard, and so because it wasn't heard, and because she is a powerful Force user with no outlet, it then expressed itself not just in violence, but in traumatic violence. So I think that's always the danger, is when you are command of the Force, you have such raw power at your disposal, if you're a Jedi, that there needs to be this ability to, as an outlet, to openly approach and discuss difficult topics. And we see Master Luminara, while being a great Jedi, it's not exactly emotionally open to disagreement in the way that we see masters in the High Republic era are. And I think part of this is due to the war, and part of it is just due to the Jedi have become dogmatic. There is one way to do this.
So with Pong, he's more so turned by the dark side. He's killing clones. He's makes a almost full heel turn.
Yeah. And I think, did he always have the predilection towards the dark side? Was he always just sort of a rigid and stern person, but would have been a perfectly fine Jedi until the crucible of war unlocked the darkness? But perhaps there were steps that happened before he fell. Mm-hmm. There was the first time that he ordered troops and saw them die. There was the first time he cut someone down with a lightsaber. There were steps he took down the path of darkness where he could have been pulled back by someone who was there if he felt open to either confessing what he had done, or if there were mechanisms to check and balance in place. But all of those failed, and because he had no oversight as a general, he was just able to take each step without being challenged until he went from likely stern and rigid but trusted Jedi master to wanting to become a Sith apprentice to Count Dooku and killing his own men by the hundreds.
And transitioning that back to Anakin, the reasons why, I would not say the reasons why Pong and Anakin turned, but motivating factors are that they are seduced. The Sith, at this point, have ceased their, 1v1 view of fighting the Jedi. They're not meeting them on the battlefield or trying to fight them on a fair front. They've been hiding. They've been preparing. They've been finding out the Jedi weaknesses, corrupting them from inside their own temple, and pushing the main buttons that the war that they allowed will affect the Jedi. So taking Anakin's motivations and turning them against him, it's a very malicious strategy that the Sith use. So the Sith have no scruples when it comes to playing dirty or dealing in manipulation. So this time of just Jedi hardening their views makes it very easy for the Sith to come along and make cracks at the brittle veneer that is the Jedi at this point. And with that, Palpatine is able to wipe them out.
So I think we can identify their rigidity, their dogma, and then they're just the war taking away their ability for people to feel like they had an outlet or could ask difficult questions. We must all focus on the war, and that just, along with Palpatine's influence, sends so many of them over the edge. And I mean, even seeing Ahsoka was almost banished from the Order or executed for a crime she didn't commit, that's not exactly going to encourage a Padawan to come forward with doubts.
Mm-hmm. And it's as soon as the Republic said, "Hey, Ahsoka, here's a subpoena," the Jedi are kind of hands off.
This is now a Republic matter.
Mm-hmm. Hold on a second. This whole entire war is a Republic matter. Why are you stepping in the first place? Why won't you step in now when one of your own, who is, you should know better, is not a terrorist leader or actor? Why not support them? So, yeah, it doesn't make for a very supportive group.
Then going on in time, we see that because, we have two other survivors of the Clone Wars. One is a Bakken Jedi, Ezra Bridger, and one is a Padawan who survives Order 66, Cal Kestis. Both struggle with the dark side. Ezra Bridger almost falls under the influence of Maul and has a Sith holocron. He openly uses powers such as Force Dominate and Force Choke before being pulled back to the light side by his master. But he has a very real possibility of falling to the dark side. That's because he's engaged in an endless war against the Empire. And he sees the need to use every tool at his disposal. And I think this is just a sign that this, without the right support network, but Ezra doesn't fall to the dark side, and Cal Kestis does not fall to the dark side, and both of them is due to, it's kind of a counterintuitive, but they have a support network of people that care about them and act as their anchor, which is, that counterbalance was removed in a lot of the prequel Jedi, who were encouraged not to form attachments to an unhealthy degree, because Elzar Mann in the High Republic, his best friend is still in Geos, the member of the Jedi Council. So Ezra Elzar still feels like he can go to Stellan, fall to his knees, and say, "Help me," and Stellan can pull him up and say, "I will help you." There's no one that Ahsoka can do that for except her master. There's no one that Ponkrell presumably could do that for. So that option has been removed. Like, you shouldn't have that attachment. You should just be by yourself. And so, but it is only by having the bonds with the Ghost crew and with Kanan in particular that pulls Ezra back from the edge of falling to the dark side. And in Jedi Survivor, it is only his bond with Merrin, and it's just a straight up romantic bond that keeps him from falling to the dark side entirely. But that's still, the jury's still out on if Cal Kestis will manage to pull himself back, because it's also shown that something threatening Merrin is one of the triggers that will cause him to call upon the dark side. So always that two-edged sword. I don't see Cal Kestis just being able to accept the death, like, oh, her death was inevitable and I need to not fall to the dark side. I don't see that level of detachment being present for Cal Kestis. So I worry for my favorite Bakken Jedi here.
I mean, we can apply this same thinking to Luke, where it's Luke's attachment to his friends and Luke's attachment to his father, which serve as motivators for both his dark and light moments. We have him violently attack Darth Vader when Vader threatens to entice his sister Leia to the dark side. But we also have Luke throwing his lightsaber away, able to just internalize that, my friends will be well, I will not fall to the dark side. And this act in itself is going to help turn my father, whose attachment to his son turns him from dark to light.
You even see Palpatine say, you failed, Your Highness, and then, and then Palpatine taunting him, it is your faith in your friends is your weakness. So, your faith was done. Your faith in your friends is yours.
It's not. It's his strength, and that makes it so. I'll say disappointing when we have Luke's first student have to grapple with attachment in the form of Grogu. Do you choose the Jedi? Do you choose the path of the Mandalorian? And at this point, it's, if Luke had internalized that attachment can, yes, be a temptation of anger, of selfishness, it could also be this supporting, galvanizing force in order to fight for good and for hope.
Yeah. I will quote one of my favorite Jedi from the Expanded Universe, technically Legends, but nothing has yet said that Jolie Bindo from Knights of the Old Republic did not exist. So in conversations with the main character of Knights of the Old Republic, he says, passion is dangerous, but can be controlled. Love itself will save you, not condemn you. And he himself is a Jedi who left the Order due to falling in love, and it was that love that saved him from the dark side. So I think this is an ongoing grappling point. And I think it makes sense that Luke idolizes the Jedi that came after, especially after being trained by Obi-Wan and Yoda, neither of which told him it's like, oh no, our teachings, until Yoda comes in and finally it was like, we tried, and then where we ended up failed. The people who come after us need to do better.
It's almost like Luke did what he needed to defeat the Emperor, save Vader, and then it's like, okay, now I can restart the Jedi Order. He's not starting the new Jedi Order.
He's trying to resurrect the old one.
Using ancient text, which could be from the Old Republic, New Republic, it's not certain, but I enjoy him using droid labor instead of human labor, or living labor, to create the new Jedi Temple. But at the same time, that training with Grogu, it shows the seeds of that narrow
dogma.
Thinking. Yeah.
And perhaps he's right in that, even Ahsoka refuses to train Grogu because Grogu has too strong an attachment to Din Djarin. He straight up force choked Cara Dune when she thought Cara Dune was attacking him. But then that just leaves him with a power he can't understand or control. So ultimately, I think Luke ended up being too rigid, and we know, if you look at the Rise of Kylo Ren comic, that the same way that lacking a support network or someone they felt they could go to with difficult questions, Ben Solo doesn't feel like he can go to Luke to tell him about, oh, this is my strange friend I have visions of.
And with Snoke meddling in both of their minds, as a Palpatine Strand cast would, we see that he's taking this relationship and twisting it, and we see that there's fear in Luke that he has created a new Darth Vader, and something happened where he lost the ability to believe in redemption, where it could be out of fear that he chose to possibly assassinate his nephew. Fear of failure, fear of making the same mistakes that those before him made.
In the process, Luke then made the same mistakes. He did not trust his Padawan. He gave him both too much true freedom and too little, put too much responsibility on him early, put too many expectations on all of his students. And so his order fell again. And then he did the same thing Yoda did, in that he just retreated away from the world, broken in the same way that Obi-Wan and Yoda were. And it took Yoda telling him, like, I did the same thing, and it turned out okay, but I mean, we got to do better than this, man.
Yeah.
We can't just keep retreating. We're running out of remote, force-sensitive planets for lone, broken Jedi to go to. Tatooine, Dagobah, and Octo are all taken. So where's the next one gonna go? This real estate ain't cheap.
3 in the next movie, but at this point, Yoda says fear is the best teacher. So instead of trying to stick with tradition, learn from tradition, learn from the mistakes that tradition brought you, and progress beyond your teachers, because that will allow an order to stick. So I really hope that when we do get this standalone Rey film, if we see her try to stick with traditions, learn from them. Or at this point, not stick with traditions and realize that your friends and your family can be support, and that it's passion that should be controlled, not just attachment that should be cut.
There was some progressive ideals, some need to grow, and I think if I want to pick one aspect that caused the original Jedi Order to fall, it was the inability to grow and change, the inability to evolve. Stagnancy and dogma were what brought the downfall of the Jedi Order. I mean, and then obviously the millions of clone troopers that killed them, but that. Yeah. But
that's the practical reason.
Yeah, but they were put in that. They were put in that position. I mean, they never had the numbers to, if someone had seriously wanted to exterminate them, but they were put in a position where they were then vulnerable to that. And so I think it was. I mean, we blame Palpatine for actually killing them, but we can look at the reasons in which the Jedi Order was then vulnerable to people falling and then being taken by surprise and destroyed so easily.
And at some point, I'd like to return to that conversation of balance, because I do agree that it's the stagnation in the Jedi viewpoint that led to their downfall. It's them becoming too active as peacekeepers in the Jedi, when instead of being tools of the Republic, they should be a more organic part of the Republic. Without having that antagonistic force, that face to fight against, I don't know, what sort of influence does that have? What does that idea of balance look like? But in large, it's the idea that the Jedi don't grow, and it's like a 1-to-1 where Luke has not grown, and therefore the pseudo-new Jedi Order failed in remarkably the same way as the old Jedi Order. So hopefully Rey learns. Hopefully the audience gives Rey a chance to be portrayed learning that. You Star Wars fans, no one hates Star Wars like Star Wars fans, as we say.
Yeah, we try to maintain a positive outlook about every aspect of Star Wars here. Yeah, so that is our take on why the Jedi Order and then Luke's Jedi Order fell. Mostly the latter, because it was trying to copy the former too directly, and why we're hopeful that Rey will create a new Jedi Order, much in the same way that the original EU had Luke, where Luke had a wife, Luke acknowledged attachment, Luke iterated on what the Jedi had done in the past, and acknowledged the need for a different approach going forward into a new galaxy. We're hoping that Rey learns the same lesson. And I'm excited to see how Daisy Ridley can portray this mentor character.
She deserves her time. Not to be an old crone teacher who is on a distant planet alone because she failed, but no, just progressing in a positive, natural, organic way.
Yeah, plus with planet prices right now, I don't think she can afford her own retreat. So I think she needs to stick it out and try to make the new Jedi Order until at least planet prices come down a little bit.
Yeah. The world has changed in too many ways.
All right. Well, thank you for the talk, Connor. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time for more Star Wars.
We'll see you sometime soon in a galaxy right here.